Grieving parents planted a hidden camera at their son's grave and noticed the unthinkable. Losing a child is every parent's worst nightmare. And if anyone knows this, it's Jacob and Tashana Armstrong. As if the loss wasn't bad enough, someone seemed to be taunting them. Only they didn't realize it until they visited their son's grave at the cemetery. So what was going on in the cemetery? You will find out very soon. But before we continue, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button below. And don't forget to turn your notifications on so you don't miss our new videos. Now, let's continue. Jacob and Tashana Armstrong imagined they would get to see their child grow up into the incredible man he was destined to become. But that didn't happen. During the birthing process, little McCade Armstrong lost his life. But this was just the beginning of his parents' heartbreak. Coping with the loss of their child was unbearable at first. But they still had each other to get through one of the worst things they had to do: bury their son. McCade's life was short, but he still was and would always be a very important part of the Armstrongs' lives. He was the most beautiful thing they had ever laid their eyes on, and his spirit would live inside their hearts. When the family first decided to visit the cemetery where they laid McCade to rest, Jacob and Tashana prepared their other children for what would obviously be a very somber experience. But the family didn't expect that this visit would also change the way they thought about their town. McCade would never get to play with toys like a regular child, but his parents frequented the graveyard and left adorable flags, pinwheels and toys at his grave. But he never got to enjoy them for long, and it's not because he wasn't alive. It wasn't long before the grieving parents realized that their son wasn't the only thing missing in their lives. Something else had vanished without a trace. Unbeknownst to the Armstrong family, something amiss was going on frequently at the cemetery where they laid their child to rest. Whenever they laid toys, trinkets or letters down on their son's grave, they disappeared by their next visit. The broken-hearted parents realized that someone was taking the items they left behind. This pinwheel doesn't mean a whole lot to the next person, but it does mean a lot to the person who placed it there, the mother told Inside Edition. Little McCade's dad was really angry when someone had taken these items from his son's grave. He decided that the best way to catch the guilty party in the act would be to set up a hidden camera. So that's exactly what he did. The camera was only a few feet away, but that's all he needed to learn the identity of the grave robber. To catch their thief on camera, Jacob Armstrong had to find specially made cameras that could be reliable and undetected by other people in the cemetery. Armstrong didn't want to harm anyone else's mourning experience, or alert the thieves that there was something more valuable to take than a child's toys. The camera Armstrong chose would blend in with the trees behind his son's grave, and not emit any light or sound while it was recording. He was willing to go to any lengths possible to ensure that his son could finally rest in peace. Thankfully, the camera did its job and proved that it wasn't a curious animal or mysterious natural phenomenon moving their belongings, but a man who seemed to be purposefully taking the items. Not only did their camera catch a man stealing from their son's grave, the Armstrongs also caught the thief stealing from nearby graves as well, proving that this wasn't a targeted crime. And the strangest part was that the man seemed very nonchalant about what he was doing. The grieving father had managed to capture two shady characters lurking over the grave on the camera he had hidden in the bushes. But the footage wasn't clear enough to see the ones responsible. So, he went back to the graveyard and changed the camera's position to get a better look. Luckily, the cemetery where the Armstrongs visited also helped the couple in their search for the thief, who was taking their belongings by letting the couple view security camera footage and get in touch with other families who visited the cemetery as well. But even this advantage didn't make their search much easier. After changing the camera's position and setting out more toys for taking, the Armstrongs returned home to keep an eye on the footage that their camera captured. As luck would have it, it did work. But the guilty party wasn't what the Armstrongs were expecting. In the footage, they finally got to see an old man picking up a pinwheel from the grave and then walking away. The couple had to act fast, but they couldn't do it alone. After viewing the video, the couple got to work trying to identify the man who visited their son's grave. They got in touch with a local news team to assist in their search, and the news team led the couple to the local police department. The Armstrongs went to the North Enid Police Department in Oklahoma. There they handed the footage to Deputy Chief James Logsdon. The news organization that the Armstrongs contacted assured the family that this wasn't the first time this crime had happened, let alone the first time it had happened in their town. Old evidence showed people stealing flowers, toys, and even balloons from grave sites, and thankfully these perpetrators were fined and sometimes arrested for their actions. Logsdon gave the images of the thief to a local newspaper. In no time, tips helped authorities identify the suspect as 77-year-old Alfred Boyer. Then, cops headed over to his location to finally bring him to justice for what he had done. A police body camera captured Boyer's arrest. He was charged with petty larceny, but the Armstrongs were stunned that someone would do such a cold, heartless thing to a baby's grave. "It's heartbreaking," McCade's mother told Inside Edition, but it wasn't over. "I'm sorry I did that," Inside Edition quoted Boyer saying, "I'm not a bad person." But it turns out that he wasn't the only person responsible for the heinous crime. There was another person in the initial blurry footage who didn't stay hidden for long. A then 58-year-old woman named Jo Faye Witt had also been caught on camera stealing from McCade's graveyard alongside Boyer. So, cops went to her place of work to confirm that she was the culprit they were looking for. But when they arrived, she didn't seem the least bit surprised. Jo Faye Witt was known in town for her only criminal behavior. A few years prior, she had been arrested for prostitution and food stamp fraud. Sadly, she struggled to get back on her feet after her prior run-in with the law, and police knew just where to find her. Logsdon had gone to Brahms restaurant to identify Witt as the second culprit. He spoke to her outside of the establishment. According to the affidavit, she and Boyer had been driving around when he decided to go to the cemetery. Then they got out of their vehicle and walked around. She claimed that Boyer commented on an item and then picked it up, but she assumed it was perfectly okay to do so. It seemed obvious to the mourning family that it was a crime to steal other people's belongings, but that was not so evident to the criminals who stole from them. They thought that Witt must have been out of her mind to say something like that, until they heard what she had to say next. Witt claimed that she and Boyer had read an article from Memorial Park Cemetery asking people to remove items from grave sites so they could mow the lawn. According to the affidavit, they thought it was just okay to go and take the items off the graves, but Witt was destined to go to jail anyway. Just because Witt wasn't aware of the law did not mean that she wouldn't be arrested for it. Witt's previous crimes of obtaining food stamps by fraud and using stolen credit and debit cards proved that she wasn't someone who usually followed the rules, and police knew that. Witt reportedly had outstanding warrants anyway, so when Enid police officers came to arrest her at her place of work, the grave robbery offense was like icing on the cake. Witt's prior crimes left her serving years in prison, and when she was released, she went back to her old behavior. She was charged with a misdemeanor count of petty larceny and a count of knowingly concealing stolen property. These charges came with a sentence of 6 months in jail and a hefty fine. Deputy Chief James Logsdon with the North Enid Police Department was happy to see the case closed so the Armstrong family could visit their son without fear once again. When contacted by local news teams, Boyer also didn't realize that he had done anything wrong. But he later apologized to the family and told the news audience that he didn't think his actions made him an evil person, just a sadly mistaken one. Boyer and Witt's actions showed a lack of consideration for the Armstrongs' feelings, and although Boyer didn't feel his actions made him evil, he certainly didn't stop to consider how they might have hurt someone else. I hope he and his cohort will never touch another burial site ever again. Do you believe Boyer deserved a punishment as well? Share your opinion with us below. Thank you for watching this video.